They say if you walk past the Carter farmhouse after midnight, you can still hear someone breathing beneath the floorboards. A slow, rasping sound, like a man caught between prayer and punishment. Some call it the wind through the cracks. Others say it's Reverend Nathaniel Carter, still waiting to be forgiven. Before we continue, take a breath. The past is closer than you think. Subscribe to remember what others forgot. The year was 1883, and the woods around Black Hollow were thick with fog and superstition. The Carter home stood on a rise of dying grass, its roof sagging, windows sealed with grime. No birds perched on its chimney. No dogs barked near its fence. It was a house that had learned silence the way some learn scripture, word by word, pain by pain. Margaret and Eliza Carter lived there alone. Two pale sisters in their 30s, dressed always in mourning black. They kept to themselves, venturing into town once a month for bread, kerosene, and salt. The townsfolk watched from behind their curtains, whispering as the sisters passed, their faces still as porcelain, their voices almost never heard. "Strange women," said the baker's wife. "Cursed," muttered the blacksmith. "Haunted," added the schoolteacher. They were all right in their own way. Inside the Carter home, time did not move as it did elsewhere. Candles burned low and long. The clock on the mantel had stopped years ago. Dust floated like pale ghosts through the still air. The air carried a smell of iron, damp earth, and something faintly sweet, decay disguised as perfume. At the center of the parlor lay an old rug, heavy and dark. Beneath it, the floor creaked differently than anywhere else in the house. When the sisters walked across it, they stepped lightly as if treading over a sleeping beast. Each evening, Eliza lit a lantern and carried it down the narrow hallway toward the cellar door. The hinges moaned as she opened it. The light fell down a staircase swallowed by darkness. She would pause there listening. Then quietly she would descend. Margaret stayed upstairs, seated by the cold hearth, her hands clasped in her lap, her lips moving in soundless prayer. From below came the faint clink of a chain. Once a cough, then silence. Outside, the fog thickened, crawling over the fields, up the porch steps, pressing its ghostly fingers against the windows. The moon hid behind clouds. Somewhere in the woods, a lone owl cried out and was answered by nothing. In town, no one spoke of the Carters after sundown. The last man who had gone up to their home, a debt collector, had returned white as paper, muttering that he'd seen something in the basement, something that wasn't right. He'd refused to describe it, packed his horse and left Black Hollow before dawn. The sheriff rode up the next day to check, but when he reached the house, the sisters stood on the porch, calm and polite. They offered tea. They smiled. They said they had no visitors, no debts, and no secrets. He didn't press further. He didn't want to. And so the house kept its secret. Every Sunday, the sisters dressed in black lace and stood before the cracked mirror in the hallway. They adjusted their veils, brushed the dust from their skirts, and sang softly, a hymn their mother used to hum. Their voices were beautiful, haunting, perfectly in tune. But no one ever heard them outside the house. The last verse always ended the same way. "Forgive us, Father, for we have sinned." That night, the wind howled through the shutters like a dying sermon. The rug in the parlor shifted slightly, though no one touched it. Beneath it came a soft, wet whisper, something like laughter, something like prayer. Eliza froze mid-step. Margaret's candle flickered, though there was no draft. The house held its breath. Then from deep below, a voice rasped up through the floorboards. "Girls?" Both sisters went still. The candle went out. Only the moonlight, pale and merciless, remained. And somewhere beneath them, the sound of chains began to stir again. The night creaked, the walls whispered, and the house on Black Hollow Road remembered everything. The cellar of the Carter house was built before the war, carved from stone and clay by the sisters' grandfather. It was cold even in summer, the kind of cold that came from the ground itself. Candles refused to stay lit there, and the air was always damp. It smelled of metal, mold, and something older, something human. Eliza descended the steps slowly, her lantern swaying. The light trembled across the walls, revealing hooks, ropes, and wooden beams darkened by age. Water dripped steadily from the ceiling. The noise was small, but in that silence, it felt like thunder. At the base of the stairs, a man sat in the shadows. His hair was white, his beard tangled, his wrists bound in rusted chains that stretched to a post embedded in the stone. His clothes were rags, his feet bare. Yet his eyes, pale and sharp, still carried the weight of command. "Is it Sunday?" he asked. His voice was hoarse, dry but steady. Eliza didn't answer. She placed a bowl of soup beside him. The steam rose faintly before fading into the cold. "I prayed for you," he whispered. "Both of you. Every day." She turned her face away. You lost the right to pray long ago. He laughed, a sound like grinding stone. You sound like your mother. She said the same before she burned. Eliza's hand shook. She set the lantern down and backed away. Do not speak her name. She screamed for you, he said, voice low. For both of you. While you hid under the bed. Her jaw tightened. The chain rattled as the man leaned forward. You remember, don't you? He said softly. The firelight on her face. The smell of her skin. The lantern flickered. Eliza turned and hurried up the stairs, locking the door behind her. Margaret waited at the top, hands clasped. He spoke again? Yes. Then we do not open the cellar tomorrow. He must sit in silence. Eliza nodded. But as she walked past, she caught her sister's reflection in the window. Margaret's eyes lingered too long, watching her, measuring her. There was something else there, something like fear. That night, the sisters ate in silence. The grandfather clock ticked in the corner, though it had not been wound in years. A storm began outside, rain slapping the roof, thunder rolling through the hills. When Margaret rose to clear the plates, she noticed something dark seeping through the floorboards near the rug. She knelt, touched it, and found it wet. It was not water. Blood, she murmured. Eliza froze. The sound of thunder covered a faint noise from below, the scrape of metal on stone, slow and deliberate. They looked at each other. We chained him tight, Eliza said. Perhaps he's not alone, Margaret whispered. The house groaned under the storm. Candles bent and went out. The sound of footsteps, slow, dragging, echoed from below the floor. Margaret crossed herself. Eliza stepped back. The rug moved again just slightly. Then came a single heavy knock from beneath it. One knock. Then silence. The storm eased. The candles rekindled on their own, faintly glowing as though something unseen had breathed life into them. Margaret whispered, He was a reverend once. Maybe he still knows how to call the dead. Eliza turned toward her, eyes cold. Then we'll remind him we are the living. They both stood motionless as another sound rose, a breath, long and ragged, coming from the cracks between the boards. The sisters did not speak for the rest of the night. But when dawn came, the rug had shifted again. By the third morning the storm had passed, but the house seemed to have absorbed it. Its beams creaked like something settling after a long argument, and the windows sweated fog despite the cold. The Carter sisters moved through its halls as if wading through a memory they could not escape. Margaret awoke first. The Bible lay open beside her bed, though she could not recall opening it. The candle on her nightstand had burned down to a stub, but the wick was blackened in a way that suggested it had relit itself, perhaps more than once. Downstairs the scent of smoke lingered. She followed it to the parlor, where the fireplace glowed faintly though no wood had been added since last night. A single coal pulsed red at its heart, steady and deliberate as if waiting for breath. Something's been burning, she murmured. Eliza entered behind her, clutching a tin cup of coffee. Her eyes were hollow, her dress half-buttoned. He's been speaking again. I heard it before sunrise. Humming, maybe praying. Margaret frowned. You locked the door? Yes. I checked twice. They stood there for a moment, both knowing that the chains were never the problem. It was the silence that made him dangerous. When they finally opened the cellar door, the air that rose was thick and metallic. The bowl from yesterday was overturned, its contents blackened, the soup crusted to the stone. The chain was still taut, yet something had changed in the way it hung. The man, Reverend Silas Carter, was kneeling now, eyes closed, lips moving. Around him were symbols drawn in the dirt with what looked like ash. A circle, broken lines, and marks shaped like crosses turned upside down. Margaret's voice trembled. What are you doing? He looked up slowly, smiling as if seeing them after a long absence. Praying for forgiveness. Yours, mine, hers. Eliza's face hardened. You think prayer will save you? I think it already has, he whispered. The sister stepped back. The circle around him seemed darker than before, the air within it slightly warped, as though heat shimmered there without flame. He tilted his head, studying them. You've kept me down here for 7 winters. But tell me, have you buried your sin as well as you've buried me? Margaret's hand trembled. Enough. She reached for the lantern, but before she could strike a match, his voice rose, low at first, then louder, echoing like thunder beneath the floor. Fire cleanses, Margaret. Do you not remember her words? If he burns me, I will take his bloodline with me. The flame burst in her hand before she could touch it. She gasped, dropping the lantern. It rolled, spilling oil onto the floor. The fire caught instantly, flaring around the Reverend's feet, licking at the walls. But he did not move. He stood there, smiling through the smoke, the light glinting in his eyes. Eliza grabbed her sister and pulled her back up the stairs, slamming the door shut. The fire roared below, muffled by the stone, but the heat pressed through the boards like the breath of something ancient. They backed away, coughing, eyes watering. Then the sound came again. A voice, deep, resonant, chanting through the crack of flame. It was not their father's voice anymore. It was older. Margaret covered her ears. He's summoning something. Eliza, he's not just praying, he's calling. Eliza turned toward the window. Then we'll answer. She fetched the shotgun from the mantel and loaded it with trembling hands. But as she did, the fire stopped. The silence was worse. When they opened the cellar again, there was no smoke, no flame, no sign of life. The floor was cold. The bowl was untouched, the chain unbroken. And the Reverend sat exactly as before, his head bowed. Only his eyes were open now, white and unblinking. Margaret took a step back. He's dead. Eliza knelt. No, he's waiting. The lantern light flickered once, then steadied. From somewhere deep beneath the stones came a faint metallic sound, another chain dragging, one they hadn't placed. And the old house groaned again, as if remembering the night their mother screamed. The night that followed felt longer than any before it. The Carter sisters did not speak through supper. The stew boiled untouched. The clock on the mantel had stopped ticking. Outside, a mist had crept down from the mountains, swallowing the woods in a white hush. Only the faint scraping from the cellar reminded them that something still lived, or pretended to. Margaret sat by the window, staring at the reflection of the house lanterns in the fog. He was breathing, she said finally. When I looked at him. He was dead, but he was breathing. Eliza didn't look up from the shotgun she was cleaning. Then we'll make sure he isn't tomorrow. Margaret's fingers tightened around the curtain. You still believe killing him again will change what happened? Eliza's jaw flexed. What else is left to do? He killed her. He killed Mother. A sound interrupted her, 3 slow knocks from beneath the floor. They froze. The knocks came again, heavier this time, like fists striking stone. Eliza rose, the shotgun half lifted. Margaret whispered, He's chained, Eliza. He can't move. Then who's knocking? The third set of knocks came louder, closer, then silence. The sisters looked at each other, neither daring to breathe. Then, faintly through the floorboards came a whisper. It was not words, more like a sigh drawn through the walls. The sound of breath where there shouldn't have been any. Margaret took the lantern and moved toward the cellar door, every step a protest of creaking wood. She knelt and placed her ear to the keyhole. For a moment there was nothing. Then she heard him, humming. The same low tune their mother used to sing before she died. She pulled back sharply. He's singing her lullaby. Eliza crossed herself. Don't say her name. Margaret whispered, You think she's the one answering? Enough. Eliza's voice broke, rough and desperate. You start believing in ghosts, you'll end up becoming one. She blew out the lantern and the room plunged into shadow. Only the pale spill of moonlight through the window outlined their faces. But as darkness settled, something else glowed faintly in the corner of the room, a soft red shimmer crawling up through the cracks in the floor. Eliza. I see it. The glow pulsed again, then spread, tracing the boards in strange patterns. It was as if the light was writing something beneath them, a language older than ink or prayer. Eliza moved closer, her eyes narrowing. It's letters. Amar. Before she finished, a sudden burst of cold wind blew through the house, knocking over the candle stand. The fire went out completely. And from below came the unmistakable sound of a door unbolting. The sisters stumbled backward as the cellar door trembled once, then flung open. A draft of air rose up, thick and wet with the smell of ash and iron. Silence followed. Then came a single footstep on the cellar stairs. Margaret clutched her sister's arm. We buried him in chains. Eliza's voice was barely a whisper. Maybe he wasn't the one we chained. The figure that rose from the cellar was not their father, or not exactly. His shape was the same, but his skin seemed carved from soot and coal, his eyes burning faintly red. He moved slowly, each motion dragging sparks from the air as though the fire still lived inside him. Eliza raised the gun. Stay where you are. The voice that answered was a blend of their father's and something else, something echoing, distant, hollow. You should have let me burn. Margaret stumbled back, shaking her head. We tried to save you. The figure's face twisted into something like a smile. You tried to save the wrong one. The lantern flared without warning, filling the room with searing light. For a moment they saw it clearly, the marks on his chest, symbols scorched into his flesh. A circle with a single open eye at its center. Margaret gasped. That's not his doing, those marks, they're from her book. Eliza fired. The gun roared, the smoke filled the room, but when it cleared, the figure was gone. Only the cellar door remained open, the chain lying in a perfect circle on the floorboards. The house returned to silence. Then, faintly through the open door, came a woman's voice. Soft, trembling, familiar. Eliza. Margaret, come downstairs. I made supper. Margaret's knees buckled. That's. I know who it is. Eliza's voice cracked. And she's dead. The air grew colder still, and the whispering returned, rising now through every wall. The sisters pressed together as shadows lengthened along the floor, stretching toward them like reaching hands. And somewhere deep beneath, a prayer began. Not holy, not human, but something that crawled between faith and hunger. It was the same prayer their father once taught them. Only now it was being said backward. The Carter house didn't feel like a home anymore. The scent of smoke never left the halls, the windows wept with condensation, and each night the walls seemed to pulse, as if the very wood had veins that beat with something alive inside. The sisters didn't sleep for days. They took turns sitting by the door with a loaded gun, listening for the footsteps that never stopped echoing beneath the floorboards. By the fourth night, Margaret started talking in her sleep. She whispered names, old ones from before they were born. When Eliza shook her awake, she had claw marks on her arms, deep and fresh, as if someone had been dragging nails down from the inside of her skin. It's her, Margaret gasped. Mother's angry. We trapped him down there, but we never buried her. She's the one still moving in the walls. Eliza looked at her sister and didn't answer. She had seen something too, just before dawn, a reflection in the mirror that wasn't her own. Her own face looked back at her, but the eyes had belonged to someone else. The morning light didn't help. The mist still pressed against the windows like a living thing. Even the rooster that had crowed every dawn was gone, just a patch of feathers by the fence. That afternoon they decided to open the cellar again. Not out of courage but out of exhaustion. Eliza held the lantern, Margaret clutched a rusted cross. The air that rose up was heavy and warm, like something had been breathing down there all along. Stay behind me, Eliza said, but Margaret was already moving, drawn down the steps by something she couldn't name. The light flickered. The walls were wet, streaked with black soot. The chain lay in a heap at the bottom of the stairs, and next to it, footprints. Bare, wide, leading deeper into the dark. Eliza, Margaret whispered. He's not alone down here. At the far end of the cellar was a stone door. It hadn't been there before. Its surface was carved with strange spirals and slashes that shimmered when the lantern came close. Margaret reached out, her fingers trembling. It's warm. Before Eliza could stop her, she pressed her palm against the stone. The door opened, not outward but inward, like water rippling away. The light spilled over a narrow room beyond, its walls covered with markings, the same eye symbol over and over. And in the middle, sitting on the dirt, was a woman's dress. Torn. Burned. Their mother's dress. Margaret fell to her knees. She didn't leave. She never left this place. Eliza's voice was barely a whisper. That's not possible. We buried her. Did we? Margaret turned, her eyes wide and glassy. We buried someone, but not her. Before Eliza could speak, the dress began to move. Slowly. The fabric shuddered, lifting as if filled by invisible air. The sleeves rose, the bodice straightened, and then the dress began to hum, a low vibration that rattled the lantern glass. Mother? The voice that came wasn't gentle. It was a hiss, stretched and hollow. You chained your father. You freed the wrong soul. Margaret stumbled back. He killed you. Did he? The voice laughed, a sound like wind scraping through a crypt. He tried to stop me. The cellar began to shake. Dirt fell from the ceiling. Eliza grabbed her sister's arm, dragging her toward the stairs, but the steps were already twisting, splitting apart like roots breaking through wood. Something moved beneath them, something crawling fast. Eliza fired the gun, the sound deafening in the small space. The shot hit the wall, shattering part of the stone. Behind it was another chamber, smaller, lined with bones. Children's bones. Dozens of them. Margaret's scream broke the air. Those aren't ours, Eliza, those aren't ours. Eliza stared, her hands trembling as realization crept in. Their family had lived on this land for generations. The townsfolk never came near it. There had always been whispers of disappearances, of travelers who never returned. Their father hadn't been the monster. He had been guarding something worse. The whisper came again, close to their ears now, though no lips spoke it. He kept me here. He thought he could chain hunger. Eliza fired again, but the lantern went out with the blast. The darkness swallowed everything. Then came the hands. Cold, damp, and many. They rose from the dirt, grabbing at ankles, pulling, dragging. Margaret's screams turned to sobs as she kicked and clawed, but the hands only tightened. "Eliza," she screamed. "Don't let them take me." Eliza dropped the gun and grabbed her sister's arm, pulling with everything she had. "Hold on." For a moment, Margaret's fingers slipped through the grime, and then she was gone, dragged into the earth with a single muffled cry. Silence fell again. Eliza was alone in the dark, breathing hard, shaking. The air felt heavier now, every breath coated in ash. She could still hear her sister's voice echoing faintly beneath her. Then from the pit came another voice. Her father's. "Eliza, finish it. Burn the house. Before she wakes." Eliza stumbled backward, staring into the black pit. Her lantern flickered once more before dying completely, leaving only the faint orange glow rising from the cracks in the stone. And in that light she saw something move, something that had her sister's face but not her eyes. "Margaret." The figure smiled. "Mother's waiting upstairs." The cellar went silent again. Only the house creaked above them, the beams groaning like old bones. Eliza climbed the stairs one trembling step at a time. Every sound followed her, the whispers, the scraping, the heartbeat of something ancient. When she reached the top, she saw the parlor light burning. The same room where they had once buried their father's ashes. The same room now filled with smoke again. Eliza dropped to her knees, coughing, eyes stinging from the fire's glow. And then she saw her, sitting in the chair by the hearth, wearing that same scorched dress. Her mother smiled, her teeth blackened with soot. "You can't kill what was born in the fire." Eliza raised the shotgun one last time. "Then I'll join you in it." The trigger clicked, and the Carter house burned again. The Carter house was burning long before the flames reached its roof. The air itself seemed to carry fire, the smell of resin, the sting of smoke, the echo of screams that never quite faded. From the outside, the farmhouse looked like a lantern caught between worlds, each window glowing red as if the walls were bleeding light. The wind screamed through the valley, carrying ash and whispers down to the hollow. Inside, Eliza stood at the top of the stairs, her hair soaked in sweat and soot. The shotgun lay broken at her feet. The fire had spread faster than she imagined, crawling along the beams like it had been waiting for her to strike the match. She'd done it without thinking. Just one trembling flick of the lighter and the whole world ignited. The cellar door below was still open. From it came a deep, steady breathing, slow and deliberate, like something sleeping beneath the burning earth. "Eliza," a voice called softly. She turned. Her sister stood at the end of the hall, untouched by the fire. Her dress was clean. Her face calm. But her eyes, they were gone. Hollow sockets glowing faintly from within. "Eliza," she repeated, smiling gently. "You shouldn't have done that. Mother's angry now." Eliza backed away, her voice breaking. "You're not her. She's dead. You're dead." Margaret took a step forward, and the floor groaned under her feet. "Dead is just a word down here." The walls started to move. They swelled as if breathing, the wallpaper blistering and peeling in layers that pulsed like veins. The fire didn't destroy the house, it seemed to wake it. From below, a moan rose, a sound no living creature could make. It was deep and endless, carrying through the boards, rattling the windows, turning the flames blue. "Eliza." This time, the voice wasn't her sister's. It was her father's, calling up from the depths. "Finish it. You must finish it." Her hands shook as she reached for the matchbox again, though everything was already burning. "How? How do I stop this?" The voice came again, closer now, almost at her ear. "You burn it all, including the blood that started it." Eliza froze. Her gaze fell to her arm, where the skin shimmered faintly under the firelight. The same mark that had appeared on the cellar wall, the spiral eye, was now etched into her flesh. "No," she whispered. "I didn't choose this." Margaret's laugh echoed down the hall. But the fire did. Eliza's vision blurred. She stumbled back toward her mother's old room, the one no one entered since the day of the burial. The door was already ajar. Inside, the curtains danced in the smoke, and in the center of the room stood the charred rocking chair, swaying gently as if someone had just risen from it. A whisper slipped from the shadows. "You are my daughter. You carry what I couldn't control." The mirror beside the bed began to melt, the glass warping. Eliza saw her reflection twist, half her face, half her mother's. "You fed it with hate. the voice continued. You locked him away, but the house was always mine. Eliza screamed and hurled the lantern at the mirror. It shattered, the fire roaring higher, licking the ceiling. But instead of breaking the curse, it seemed to free it. The house shuddered. Every door flew open. The screams of long-dead souls poured out like wind through 1,000 cracks. She heard men crying, children wailing, chains snapping. Every ghost that had ever touched Carter's soil was awake now, and they were hungry. Eliza staggered toward the stairs, coughing as the smoke thickened. She could see the front door glowing in the distance, an exit swallowed by flame. But as she ran, the floor gave way. She fell through, crashing back into the cellar, the one place she swore she'd never return to. The impact knocked the breath out of her. She looked up and saw the ceiling, alive with flame, breathing like a living lung. Then through the fire she saw him. Her father. Not as she remembered him, but as something older. His face blackened, eyes bright, body bound in chains that glowed red-hot. He reached toward her with shaking hands. End it, Eliza. She crawled forward, her fingers bleeding. Tell me how. He pointed to the markings on the wall, the eye symbols, the spiral lines. They feed on blood. Yours can stop it. One sacrifice ends the circle. She hesitated, her throat tightening. You want me to die? No, he said softly. I want you to stop the house. It already has me. Don't let it have you too. The fire roared louder, cracking through the stone. Behind him, the shadow of her mother began to rise again, formed from smoke and flame, her burned dress swirling like a storm. You'll kill what's left of us, the spirit hissed. You'll kill your blood. Eliza screamed as the ground split open beneath her. The pit that had once held her father's chains now glowed with white heat, like a furnace waiting to swallow everything. She turned to him, tears streaking through the soot on her face. I'm sorry. He smiled faintly. I know. Then she jumped. The light consumed everything, her, the house, the forest around it. For a moment, it was as if the mountain itself had exhaled flame. The explosion echoed across the valley, shaking birds from the trees and sending ash raining down like snow. By dawn there was nothing left but smoke. The Carter farmhouse had vanished. Only a blackened foundation and a circle of burned trees marked where it once stood. Weeks later, the townspeople finally came to see what had happened. They found no bodies. No bones. Just a single symbol burned deep into the earth. An eye inside a spiral, glowing faintly even under the morning sun. No one built there again. They say the land still whispers at night, that if you walk too close, you'll hear two sisters arguing in the dark, one begging the other to stop, the other laughing as something burns. And sometimes when the fog rolls thick through the valley, a light flickers where the Carter house once stood, like a single ember that refuses to die.